The funeral ended beneath a bright blue afternoon sky, but the weight of grief refused to leave with the last mourners. Everyone believed the hardest goodbye had already happened. They were wrong. Just as the cemetery gates emptied and silence settled over the rows of white stones, my best friend's widow walked toward me with swollen eyes, trembling hands, and a weathered envelope pressed tightly against her chest. She stopped only a few feet away, looked at me as though she were carrying the burden of an entire lifetime, and quietly said that there was something I needed to know about what my best friend had wanted before he died. In that single moment, everything I believed about friendship, loyalty, and loss began to unravel. For more emotional stories about hope, forgiveness, and second chances, you're always welcome to follow along with our community as we continue sharing journeys that remind us of the strength of the human heart. For 26 years, Rowan Mercer had been more than my closest friend. He had been the brother life chose for me. We had grown up in neighboring houses in a quiet Vermont town where everyone knew one another's birthdays, celebrated every graduation together, and gathered for every hardship without needing an invitation. Rowan possessed the kind of generosity that made strangers feel like family. He laughed loudly, forgave easily, and never walked away from someone in need. Even after building a successful construction company, he never forgot the values his parents had taught him. He spent weekends repairing the homes of elderly neighbors without accepting a single dollar. I was different. My name is Graham Ellison, and while I loved Rowan more than anyone outside my own family, I carried a quieter heart. I had spent most of my adult life teaching history at the local high school. My life followed routines, lesson plans, and peaceful evenings. Rowan often teased me for living like an 80-year-old professor even in my 30s, while I reminded him that somebody had to keep him from taking unnecessary risks. That he married Celeste after meeting her during a charity fundraiser. She wasn't drawn to his success but to his kindness. Together they created a home filled with warmth instead of luxury. Every neighborhood child somehow found an excuse to visit their backyard, and every holiday became an open invitation for anyone without family nearby. Then everything changed in a single afternoon. A distracted truck driver crossed the center line during a rainy commute. Rowan never came home. The weeks after his death felt unreal. I helped organize paperwork, sorted through insurance documents, fixed broken fences around the house, and drove Celeste wherever she needed to go because grief had stolen her confidence behind the wheel. She thanked me constantly, but I knew none of it came close to replacing what she had lost. That afternoon after the funeral, she finally handed me the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter dated only 3 weeks before Rowan died. He wrote that if anything ever happened to him, he wanted me to help Celeste finish something they had started together. At first I assumed he meant financial matters or home repairs. Instead, the next page revealed a dream I had never heard him mention. For nearly 2 years, Rowan and Celeste had secretly been purchasing an abandoned farmhouse just outside town. Their plan was to restore it into a daytime family center where widowed parents, struggling single mothers and fathers, and children facing difficult circumstances could gather for free meals, tutoring, counseling, and community events. They had quietly invested almost everything they had because they believed no grieving family should ever feel alone. The renovation had barely begun. Without Rowan's income, the project would almost certainly fail. My first instinct was fear. I was a schoolteacher with modest savings. I knew nothing about running a community center. The practical side of me wanted to explain that Rowan had asked too much. But another sentence near the bottom of the page refused to leave my thoughts. He wrote that courage was never about feeling prepared. It was about refusing to let love end when someone was gone. For days I carried that letter everywhere. Each morning sunlight streamed through my classroom windows while I tried to teach history, but every lesson somehow reminded me that ordinary people had changed the world simply because they chose compassion over comfort. Finally I drove with Celeste to the abandoned farmhouse. The building looked hopeless. Broken windows reflected the afternoon sun. Wild grass reached almost to my knees. The roof sagged in several places, and years of neglect had left every room filled with dust. Yet as Celeste unlocked the front door, she smiled through tears. She described where children would read books, where grieving parents would drink coffee together, where volunteers would cook meals, where laughter would someday replace silence. For the first time since Rowan died, I understood exactly what he had been trying to leave behind, that IT wasn't a building, that IT was hope. That we decided to continue. The following months tested every ounce of determination we possessed. Money disappeared faster than expected, unexpected repairs multiplied, several contractors backed out after learning the project would serve families for free rather than generate profit. More than once I questioned whether we were chasing an impossible dream, yet every bright morning brought unexpected encouragement. Former students arrived carrying paintbrushes. Retired carpenters volunteered entire weekends, local gardeners donated flowers. A bakery delivered fresh bread every Friday afternoon. Someone anonymously paid for new windows. Little by little the abandoned farmhouse stopped looking forgotten. IT began looking loved. One afternoon, while organizing boxes in what would become the library, I discovered another small notebook hidden inside an old cabinet. It belonged to Rowan. Unlike the letter, these pages contained dozens of handwritten observations collected over several years. He had written about lonely veterans eating lunch alone, children embarrassed because their parents could not afford birthday parties, widows who smiled in public but cried after everyone left. He noticed pain most people overlooked. Beside nearly every story he had written the same sentence, "Nobody heals alone." I realized then that the community center had never been a sudden idea. It had become the mission of his life. Word spread throughout neighboring towns, local newspapers shared the story, volunteers multiplied. A retired therapist offered free counseling services, college students organized reading programs. Musicians performed during afternoon community gatherings. Families who had once received help returned months later to become volunteers themselves. The place slowly transformed into exactly what Rowan had imagined. Still, one final obstacle remained. The bank informed us that unless we raised the remaining balance within 30 days, ownership complications would force the property into foreclosure. The amount seemed impossible. Celeste looked exhausted. I secretly wondered whether this would be where the dream finally ended. Then something extraordinary happened. People Rowan had quietly helped throughout his life began appearing one after another. A mechanic whose medical bills Rowan had paid years earlier. An elderly widow whose roof he had repaired every winter. A young father whose first job had come through Rowan's recommendation. None of us had known these stories, none of them expected recognition, each simply remembered kindness, each contributed whatever they could. Some donated thousands, others handed over only $20 with tears in their eyes. Every gift carried equal value because every gift carried gratitude. On the final afternoon before the deadline, the last donation arrived. The balance was paid in full. No speeches could capture what that moment felt like. The building belonged to the community forever. The grand opening took place beneath warm sunshine nearly a year after Rowan's passing. Children raced across freshly planted grass, parents shared meals around long wooden tables, laughter echoed through rooms that had once been silent and abandoned. A wall near the entrance displayed a simple plaque bearing Rowan's favorite words, "Love keeps building even after we are gone." As I watched families filling every corner of the center, I finally understood why Celeste had come to me after the funeral instead of carrying the burden alone. She hadn't been delivering a request, she had been delivering a legacy. Years have passed since that unforgettable afternoon. I still teach history. Celeste now directs the center with remarkable grace. Hundreds of families have walked through its doors, some arrive broken, most leave believing tomorrow can be brighter than yesterday. Whenever someone asks how such a place came to exist, I simply think about one extraordinary friend whose greatest achievement was never the business he built or the money he earned. It was the compassion he planted inside countless ordinary hearts, proving that one life lived with genuine kindness can continue changing other lives long after that life has ended. Before you leave, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you believe is the greatest legacy a person can leave behind? Success, wealth, or simple acts of kindness that continue inspiring others? Share your answer in the comments because your perspective may encourage someone who needs hope today. If this story touched your heart, thank you for spending these moments with us. May it remind you to treasure the people you love, offer kindness whenever you can, and never underestimate how deeply one generous life can echo through countless others. Until the next story, may hope, forgiveness, and compassion always find a place in your heart.